Who is on upset alert in week 3? If you've been around here for any period of time, you know that this segment that we do on Wednesdays, this is not predicting upsets. We're just kind of trying to take a pulse. It's kind of like checking the weather. Hey, what's the percent chance of upset? What's the percent chance of rain when it comes to some of these matchups? There's a few interesting ones on the slate here. Penn State going to Illinois. Illinois, 14.5-point dogs at the crib. All right, in Champaign, Illinois. Now, keep in mind, this is Drew Aller, the quarterback for Penn State. It's going to be his first real test. Yes, they played West Virginia, but that was in Happy Valley. They played Delaware. The rosters don't really match up that way. Illinois now, a Power 5 roster in the Big Ten, and we've all seen Bielema ball now. We know they're going to have a solid defense. They're going to take the ear out of the game with the new clock rules. If they get up on Penn State, this thing could get interesting. Again, it's on the road. I cannot stress that enough. There's a lot of pieces that would lend itself to making for an upset. Now, even so, we trust Penn State's roster. We trust what they have on defense. We trust what they have on that backfield. So we're not picking Penn State to get upset here. But in terms of chance of upset, we think there's right around a 27% chance. Not impossible. We're not predicting it, but this is one to keep an eye on. It would not shock me if this thing was close at halftime. So keep an eye on that. Now, Florida State goes to Boston College, and Boston College is 26.5-point dogs at home. And if you're Florida State, yes, you're the better team. Yes, you're the better roster, but I hate everything about this spot if I'm a Seminole fan. It's a noon kick, kind of sleepy. There's not much juice to get you up for this one. It's a conference game, so there is something on that roster worth writing home about. Not a lot, mind you. And we'll talk about that here in a second. But even so, it's a roster that is a Power 5 level. It's on the road. And this is the biggest part for me. This is the most classic look-ahead spot if you're a Florida State fan. Most classic look-ahead spot. Because you know what? You go to Clemson, South Carolina, and play another game at noon the following week. And that's really the last hurdle for Florida State, that you look at the roster and say, okay, we're really worried about this game. Before the year, we were circling Clemson, Florida State as maybe a game that College Game Day would get to or something like that. I don't know if that's the case anymore. Even that game's lost some juice. But that's the last hurdle for Florida State where you say, okay, that roster in itself, we got to make sure we bring our A game going on the road over there. But you got to go play Boston College in an annoying road spot. And the quarterback for Boston College has got some dual threat ability, Thomas Castellanos. He can use his legs a little bit. Now, Boston College is down bad. They lost to NIU early in the year, and they also had a close game with Holy Cross, so they're not really swinging an enormous bat right now in terms of what they could do upset-wise, but you got to take this one seriously. If Florida State sleepwalks in there and turns the ball over a bunch of times, this thing could get a little bit tricky. Now, we don't anticipate that happening. This actually, for us, in terms of what we have on this slate, has the lowest percent chance of upset, but we had to mention it for the reasons we just did. We're putting this at a 12% chance of upset. So if you're a Seminole fan, sleep well, but I hate this. I hate this spot if I'm a Florida State fan. South Carolina goes to Athens, Georgia. They are 27.5-point dogs. That is a similar line to Ohio State playing Western Kentucky. I'll leave that there. New offensive coordinator, new quarterback for Georgia. Going to be their first real test against an SEC roster. And I said this yesterday on our live show. This is like the conclusion of fall camp for Georgia. They just played 2 nobodies, no disrespect to their schedule, but they didn't play anybody the first 2 games of the year. Played UT Martin and Ball State, all right? So they were pretty much running through whatever kind of depth chart they wanted to. Now, though, you get a real gauge for what this Georgia team is going to be. How do they handle that? How do they handle a team that they're supposed to beat by 4 touchdowns, but also has some ability of their own in South Carolina? Like we saw last year now, South Carolina, they are no stranger to playing upset. Took down Tennessee, took down Clemson. They were both double-digit underdogs in both those games. Said, no problem, we'll handle that. Let's keep on rolling. Now, Juice Wells, you hope he's healthy enough to be as effective as you want him to be, as effective as he was in those 2 upsets a season ago. But Xavier Legette now is a guy who has been balling for South Carolina. They lost North Carolina their first game of the year, but even so, he made headlines in that game with the numbers that he put up, well over 100 yards receiving. Spencer Rattler now, very quietly, looks dialed. Looks extremely dialed in. And I'm just going to go ahead and say this. If they're able to just utilize that one matchup, Xavier Legette, and there's nobody that can answer for that in the Georgia secondary, things will get very interesting. Going back to what I said about the roster, this is not a Ball State roster. This is not a Group of 5 roster. This is an SEC roster now that's going to Athens, Georgia. If you don't take it seriously, and like we talked about yesterday, if Carson Beck kind of has an ugly start to this thing and gives the ball away a couple of times, watch this game. Watch the ticker for this game and what that score is in Athens, Georgia. Even so, we're putting this at a 22% chance of upset. I don't know that South Carolina will have multiple options to try and beat Georgia when it comes to their offensive attack. Like, you got to have more than just one punch to beat Georgia. So you hope that you have more than one punch if you're South Carolina, but even so, put that percent chance of upset pretty low. Now, here's the highest percent chance of upset on this whole slate. Northern Illinois going to Nebraska. Northern Illinois, according to the spread, it's also the best chance of upset on this slate. They're 10.5-point dogs. Now, the thing with Nebraska is we saw last year, man, this was a game, not this game specifically, but this kind of game was one where Nebraska dropped to Georgia Southern. Now, it's a new era, it's a new roster, it's a new head coach. I understand all that. But don't think for a second that Nebraska isn't capable of losing this football game, especially if that turnover bug is still biting. If they didn't call the exterminator and they didn't get the pesticides and take care of what was in house there with that turnover issue, they're going to have a dogfight on their hands, no pun intended, as NIU is, of course, the Huskies. Now, Nebraska has proven they're capable of giving the ball away. They're proven they've able to lose games like this, but to a more specific and maybe more impactful note, Northern Illinois has shown they're capable of beating a Power 5 football team. They beat Boston College early in the year. So if Nebraska doesn't handle business how they're supposed to offensively, I think it goes without saying this could get a little bit intriguing, more intriguing than you would want if you're a Nebraska fan. Now, Jeff Sims, Matt Rule has already said, if he is good to go, if he is healthy, dealing with that ankle sprain, he will be the guy. I think there is some portion of the Nebraska fan base that would like to see what a Heinrich Haarberg has under the hood or a Chuba Purdy, what he can do. So it's going to be Jeff Sims unless he can't go. But if Jeff Sims goes and throws 3 picks, I'd be curious to see how they'd handle that should the game continue to roll on and he's got 3 picks like at halftime. So we'll see what happens there, but keep an eye on that. NIU could be sneaky this upcoming weekend. Last one for you. We got Georgia Tech going to Ole Miss, and Ole Miss kind of played with their food last weekend. Played Tulane, a Tulane without Michael Pratt, and they kind of struggled. Quinshon Judkins had less than 100 yards. It might have been less than 50 yards rushing. He wasn't really as effective as you would have hoped he would be if you're an Ole Miss fan. Now, for Georgia Tech, the thing that scares you if you're an Ole Miss fan is Haynes King, man. He looks like Haynes King 2.0. Remember that Haynes King we saw in College Station who was turning the football over and they get upset by App State and he just looks like he does not know what he's doing out there? He's been balling so far. Right now, he's got 7 touchdowns, 1 interception, right around 65% completion percentage. He looks dialed in. And so to have him dialed in as a passer and also have that freakish athletic ability, that can give a defense problems now. Especially if Jackson Dart has some issues turning the football over and they're not as effective as they want to be running the football in this game. Keep an eye on what could happen in this one. I think that's a good one to look at if you're looking for a cover there from Georgia Tech. But even so, put this one right around 31% chance of upset. I don't know if I told y'all that we got Nebraska NIU at 38% chance of upset, to backtrack there as well. So all that's to say, a lot of games on the slate here where there is upset potential. Again, we don't make a prediction here. We just kind of use like a forecast and give you the percent chance, and we go from there. So everyone's saying it's a sleepy slate this upcoming week. They would be wrong, and I think some of those games will give evidence as to why they're wrong based on what happens in those games. Hey, y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also, be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.